Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to this service of thanksgiving and memorial for Bonnie. My name is Andrew Pomerville, and I'm the senior pastor here at the People's Church, and truly, it's a delight to have you all in our presence. And on behalf of the whole congregation and the community here that surrounds us in East Lansing, you are very welcome. It is good for you to be here. We gather to share memories, to weep together, to laugh together, and truly to celebrate Bonnie's life very well lived. I admit I knew Bonnie through her writing, as so many others did, and yet I have been amazed to hear stories, to read testimonies, and to see how many of you loved her in so many different ways. Whenever we gather for any type of service of memorial remembrance, we're not trying to summarize a person's entire life. And with Bonnie's very vast, beautiful, and wonderful life, that would be impossible. So instead, what we're here to do is try to piece together our feelings of grief and thanksgiving, our happiness and our sadness. As part of the church here in East Lansing, we recognize that we've been called to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And so I hope today, as we hear from all the wonderful speakers and through the music, that you're able to do that together. Whether you know the people who are sitting next to you or not, you did know Bonnie, you loved her and she loved you, and her whole life then is celebrated together when we see this unique body of people who bring together those experiences, and we try to see in all of these pieces the whole. And so welcome to this place. During moments of silence and prayer, I'd encourage you to observe however you feel comfortable, and certainly know that you're welcome to stay after the service. We would strongly encourage you, and Tina and Drew invite you to come downstairs for a time for reception, to share more memories, more laughter, and more tears. You can reach the downstairs in this building any way you go, so just go out one exit and look for stairs. And if you see staff and friends here at the People's Church pointing in the right direction, please do continue to find your way, ask for help, and we'll make sure that we're all here to assist you. Again, on behalf of the congregation, we're delighted that you're here today. As an opening, the congregation would like to invite us all to reflect on and to think about the words from the Beatitudes. Regardless from our particular faith perspective, I would encourage you to understand and to remember that we are called to love one another. In all that we do, there needs to be that other. I've been so blessed living in this East Lansing community to see the many ways that our lives overlap with one another. And after Bonnie's death, I've been truly blown away to see how many people were touched by her life, by her laughter, by her insights, and truly by her friendship. And so by extension, we are all friends, we are all blessed, and we all are here to celebrate. Hear these very familiar words that come from Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are all those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see the divine. Blessed are all peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and say false things against you. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. The Beatitudes tell us that we do not live for one another. We are called not just to experience mercy, but to share it. Not just to experience forgiveness, but to forgive others. To speak on behalf of those who have no voice. Bonnie did all of these things in her life. And we celebrate then that you are all here together, and that we remember the good words that she wrote, that she sang, that she shared, that she heard, and know truly that her life continues through the legacy in this place with you, her friends, her community, her students, her colleagues, all of us who have been touched by her life. If you're comfortable, I'd invite you into a moment of silence and prayer as we prepare to hear the good words from family and friends today. In moments of heartache, in moments of grief, and certainly in moments of loss, we remember the happy times together. And so, God of all things that were, that are, and that will be, help us remember a touch, an embrace, a kind word, truly the hope that's experienced in love. As we remember Bonnie's life today, help us reflect on the loss that we experience in no longer having that hand to hold, no longer reading that next word that she offers to the world, of no longer seeing her creativity. And yet, in our grief and pain, help us remember that we weep for ourselves and not for her. We weep at the loss of her not with us today, and so we support and comfort one another. God of hope, who is present when we are aware and when we are unaware, let us see in this community of people gathered here today that Bonnie's life had meaning, had purpose, and truly had an impact on so many others. We pray especially with Drew, with Tina, with all of those who feel such a profound loss. Let us surround them with our tears and with our warm embraces. Let us be a community of people who demonstrate to the world that by loving one another, peace is possible. By accepting one another, hope is possible. And by gathering together across a variety of traditions, ideas, faiths, and more, that we truly do demonstrate your call to the world to love one another. Through your name of hope and love, we pray. Amen. We have fantastic eulogists who will be speaking today, family, friends, colleagues alike. And I would encourage you afterwards, when we go downstairs, to continue to share these memories and reflect with one another. And especially, I would invite you to speak with Drew and with Tina. While we know Bonnie in one way, it's amazing to see what other people knew of her, what other experiences they had, and to piece together her full life. And so take a lot of pride in the relationships that you had with her and share them with one another. I'd invite to start us then Bonnie's sister Tina to come and speak. Tina?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tina Erskine. I'm Bonnie's sister and only sibling. And since I've known her the longest, I asked to do the opening eulogy. You know, I just thought of it as I was sitting here. If Bucky were looking in on us right now, she'd go, God, what a great idea for Halloween. You guys are all dressed as funeral attendants. Cool. But thank you all for being here to celebrate my sister's life. I just wanted to explain that the candles that are burning here are some dear friends we have in the Bay Area, Jane, Mark, Daniel, McNulty, and I'm losing it. Who else? Mark, who sent these candles from California so that they could be connected with us. They're gathered together today in San Francisco. You know, Bonnie and I were good at being sisters. We had a 12-year age difference, so we didn't have the usual sibling rivalry and angst that a lot of, like my stepdaughters did, the three of them. And I hear the stories. And in some ways, she was like a mother to me, as well as a sister and a best friend. We used to talk about our family of origin in terms of Harlow's monkeys. Harlow was a primate researcher who proved that physical comfort was more important than food to a baby monkey. When baby monkeys were given the choice of a monkey mother made out of cold, hard wire who possessed food, or a soft, warm terry cloth mother who offered comfort, the baby monkeys would always cling to the terry cloth mother. Our mother, who was, as some of you know, not known for her warmth or maternal instincts and was not ashamed to vocalize it and admit it, was the wire mother, and my sister Bonnie was my terry cloth mother. We were like a binary star system. Our lives spun around each other in the same orbit for almost 60 years now. I knew all of her boyfriends and husbands, her friends and her enemies, and she knew mine. Many of my friends became her friends, and vice versa, and many of you guys are in the room today. I was with her through all her hardships and losses, and we grieved a lot of these losses together. Her first husband, who died of cancer when she was only 24, I was just 12. her stepdaughter Kim, who died unexpectedly, tragically in 1995, our dear friend Marquis Desaad, who was from the band Dead Engine, who we memorialized in this church in 1993, and of course our parents who died in 91 and 2003. I was with her in all our moments of happiness, too. The happiest moment my sister ever had was the day she became Drew's wife in 91. I was her bridesmaid, dressed in black, to match her black wedding dress that matched the wedding cake with the black frosting on it. You can only imagine. I know her deepest secrets, and she knew mine, and she took those with her, thankfully. Her fears and anxieties, we knew each other's fears and anxieties, and to those of you who knew my sister, you knew that she was a very fearful, anxious person. And I've always attributed that to the cost of being genius. You can see and portend what others like me are oblivious to. Bonnie and I shared a deep love of animals, too. We had our own doggy underground where we shanghaied quite a few neglected and abused animals to get them out of harm's way and into loving homes. One of the dogs that disappeared into the underground was heisted from a drug house in my old neighborhood, south of Kalamazoo, when she was running for U.S. Congress on the Green Party ticket in 2000. She named him Goober, gubernatorial, as a mascot for the campaign. But as my older sister, she sought to protect me. She stood up for me when I was unable to do so myself. She acted as my conscience when I was morally bankrupt during my marginal years. And woe be to any man who wronged me. Her exit interviews were just brutal. I once referred to my sister on social media as a pit bull on crack, and she was really hurt by that. But I had to explain to her, as a pit bull advocate, that was intended as a highest form of compliment. Bucky was like a pit bull. She was strong, high energy, and tenacious, but she had a huge heart, as all of you know. But the crack part, that was totally a joke. She didn't do crack. Yet there were times she was the one who needed protection, too. My sister lost her sense of smell sometime in her teenage years. We never really know what happened, but it's a condition called anosmia. And one time while she was cooking an Asian recipe, a hot and sour soup dish, she accidentally grabbed the ammonia instead of the white vinegar. And it was a quick call to poison control. And she also had a terrible house fire that gutted her beloved home in the woods in 1985. She was using some harsh chemicals to strip the wood floors, and she didn't smell the fumes building up in the cathedral ceilings in her home. And when she turned on the light switch, it was like, boom, the fireball shot through the house. Sorry, you guys. But it was shortly after that cleansing fire that she met her soulmate, Drew Howard. I knew Drew years before she did. Back when Drew was 19 was the first time I met him. That was back in the early 80s when we were both playing in bands in the local music scene, living like rock and roll animals like a bunch of you out there. So I reacted with utter shock and horror when my sister called me in San Francisco in 1986 to tell me she was dating Drew Howard. All of our friends, a lot of you in this room, we'd speak behind their backs in hushed voices, "Oh man, this is never gonna work. This is never gonna work." And the joke was on us. Most of us have crashed and burned through multiple relationships and marriages in the past 30 years while they held the course. Boy, were we fooled. My sister was larger than life in my eyes. As a 3-year-old, when she was 15, she would let me tag along with her and her friends to the Coke Bar in Utica, New York. It was a teen hangout, a la the Happy Days TV series. I'd watch her and her friends dance. It was so amazing. When I was 4, she taught me French, not a lick of which I remember today, of course. But we had just moved from New York to Jackson, Michigan, and everyone thought I was the illegitimate child of that too young French mother when we would hang out at the Woolworth's lunch counter and eat lunch together speaking in French. As a kid, I saw her on the runway as a department store model, and you can imagine that my childhood eyes, she was totally glamorous, and as all you have seen, she was totally beautiful. She remains my favorite photographer ever. That was a skill she took up in her 20s. She had a trailer down in Parma, Michigan, and she had her darkroom in her bathroom, and my sister had just immense talent in the visual areas, as well as many others. And I got to be there in Detroit, where this brilliant woman with no college education, just a high school diploma, accepted a Detroit Free Press Club award by late syndicated columnist Irma Bombeck back in the late 70s. I was so proud of her. And her video work, you guys have seen it. Oh my God, she used to just love to see that her vermiculture video hit like 2 million or something like that in the turducken videos. And a lot of you don't know that my sister had never held a drawing pencil or a paintbrush, ever. She was never interested in doing that kind of thing. And it was just about a year ago that she held one for the very first time. And within months, she was an accomplished artist. She illustrated not only those stylized tomatoes you see in your program, but socially relevant images that would have been worthy of the cover of New Yorker. And she was always so freaking smart. All the things she taught me, as you can imagine, as a kid and as an adult, I can't even begin to tell you, just as she taught and influenced many of you out here. In retrospect, we should have known something just wasn't right with her over the past 9 months. My husband, Ron, who saw her less frequently than I did, noted the slight cough, the slight ankle swelling, and the weakness dating back as far as last March. He would always confront her about these symptoms, and she always had an excuse for them. Those of us who were around her all the time, like Drew and I, we just didn't notice these changes as they were so subtle. And knowing my sister, she ignored them so she wouldn't get distracted from her true passions of teaching, writing, and art. And she would go out of her way not to worry Drew and I. To us, she seemed invincible. A couple of years ago, she just announced to us, and I believed her, that she was going to live to 87. That would give her enough time to do everything she had to do. The leg swelling became acute in late June, and she was diagnosed with blood clots in her right leg that we were assumed were from a period of inactivity during that early summer. It was when she was diagnosed with the second set of blood clots in late September, in spite of being on the blood thinners, that we knew there was something really seriously wrong. By this point, her cough was horrendous. She was weak and out of breath. Just walking her little Chihuahua Lemmy around the front yard severely fatigued her. But getting referrals in the current day medical system is not a quick or easy process, and we were in that maddeningly long wait period for specialist appointments that might have changed the course of her illness when she died. All the while, my sister stubbornly insisted that these symptoms were due to GERD and allergies, In spite of it all, she insisted on teaching from home via the internet during her convalescence. And she insisted on teaching a face-to-face class on what she didn't know was to be the last day of her life, because she really wanted to be with her students. She just loved her students. It was on Tuesday, October 13th at 10:38 p.m. My sister tagged me in a post on Facebook that said, "Tina Erskine is the best sister, hands down." And I went to bed that night about 11, and I checked my phone, and I saw that. And it sent chills down my spine. It was hauntingly similar to something my father had said 2 hours before he died in 91. The call from Drew the next morning confirmed my worst fear. My dearly beloved sister had died, probably just after making that post on Facebook. She didn't push the button on her lifeline for medical emergencies, and her position just off the side of the bed suggested she had died in her sleep. So thankfully, we're quite assured that she didn't suffer. Deep, unconditional love was the gift that Bonnie and I gave each other in sisterhood. And today that gift comes with an expensive price tag. Grief is the cost of loving and of being loved. A wish for all of us in our shared grief over my sister's passing. May our hearts break so completely that the wind blows through. Rest in power, beloved sister. I miss you forever.
Dear Bucky, I was in a recording studio just the other day, and not just any studio. I was at Glenn Brown's, recording dobro on a song for Joshua Davis, who's not just another singer. And Glenn had a spot for me to play over a string section. It's just absolutely beautiful, and he conducted me, and he got a great performance out of me, and I so wanted to call you or text you and tell you about it, because I know that you would want to hear about this, and this is what we shared, our work, and you would do the same to me. And so there's not a minute that I go by where I need to ask you something or I need your opinion. And so thank you, everyone, Some of you have traveled all the way across the country to be here for Bonnie and for Tina. And my name is Drew Howard, and I was Bonnie's husband and partner for 27 years. Such a sweet and selfless person she was, and so many lives that she touched. Her advice was golden, and her business sense and acumen were flawless. She wasn't proprietary about her ideas or inventions. Like her things, she gave them away, loaning out computers, cameras, advice, money, and she gave so many people their start in life. Many of you are here today, and you paid her back by pursuing successful careers for yourselves and making your own waves. And thank you for the many moving tributes to Bonnie published online. They were very nice to read. And thank you to my friends who responded to me in my hour of need by bringing food and comfort and help, and my family as well. I couldn't have done it without you. I recall Bonnie's tribute to her stepdaughter, Kim, who died at an early age from alcoholism. Bonnie published her tribute in 1995 on a new invention called a website via a new electronic medium known as the internet. Kim died and was buried while I, not knowing of the tragedy, was touring in Europe for the first time. Bonnie knew how important this tour was for me, so much so that when I spoke to her on a transatlantic phone call, she didn't tell me that Kim had died, nor did she ask me to come home. She weathered this tragedy alone, but for her sister Tina. So I'm struggling to find new words and new ways of describing this lovely woman. For as she was a woman of words, words fail to describe the woman she was. So I'll try to speak a little from our life together as her partner of 27 years, and I'm proud of that number. We weathered storms along the way, and we survived. And indeed, without her, I would not be the man I am today. And honestly, in the beginning, I don't know what she saw in me. She was Mensa level IQ smarts off the charts meets 80s rock guy. It's not that I had a beautiful mind, unlike hers. Perhaps it was other parts of me that she fell for. Her previous boyfriend was known simply as Fast Eddie the Surgeon. She was devoted to me, and I to her. We saw the world through the same lens, through the eyes of the underdog. She put me through what I called boyfriend university. When it came time to pay our bill in a restaurant, she'd slip me the money to pay for it. Always building me up into a better man and a better person, I hope. I, in turn, was protective of her. I made a mental list of the assholes who used her and wronged her and whose day of reckoning would come. We were both and are fiercely independent and felt no obligation to explain ourselves to anyone, and sometimes each other. We were who we were. We were both workaholics and career-minded, intensely focused. I so adored that in her. For the first time, someone understood me, my champion. I met Bucky at 27, and I'm now 54. So I've spent half my life with her. So some of the ironies and quirks of Bucqueroux. She was a woman who traversed the globe electronically with friends here and friends there, but wouldn't drive on the interstate. She would take Grand River Avenue all the way to Detroit. If you've got the time, that's fine. When I met her, she lived on a steady diet of Cool Ranch Doritos, True cigarettes, and Diet Coke. And that fueled her prodigious output of words. After I met her, I went back on the road, and then letters started following me at wherever I was staying, whatever motel, hotel. A package would arrive, not a letter, but a package of a passionate 24-page screed of how I love you. And that followed me everywhere on the road, so I had to make sure I got back to her. Bonnie could cook sumptuous vegetarian meals, grew her own vegetables, filtered her water 6 different ways, but wouldn't use the tap water, which was filtered. She loved circus peanuts and orange pop and root beer, which are not filtered. So, I bequeathed to her a tagline, "Nobody's going to tell me what to do." Laying on the floor with her beloved dogs, and there were so many. She was indeed one of the pack, and I was not. So there was lots of growling and barking when I entered the room. Of course, I'm a tall, large white man, and that can be scary to a little creature. A sweet little old lady with a little dog and a t-shirt that said, "Start the revolution," or "Hello, my name is Satan." Sorry. That's as bad as it gets. A badass and a curmudgeon who, beneath the veneer of hyper-realist doom, had a heart the size of a watermelon and made of gold. So how we clicked, we allowed each other space to follow our work because our work was our passion, and not every partner is going to understand that. For Zoe, you made her happy. She adored you, and she was so grateful for the time that you spent together and for the interests you shared, your art days together. And you've grown up to be a lovely young woman, and she and I are very proud of you. For any of Bonnie's students who are here today, you were her life's work. Honor her by being relentless and brave in your professional and journalistic pursuits, and never forget her. For activists everywhere, remember her bravery and follow her example. I recall one such episode. Bucqueroux would put her students and me to the test. When Danish cartoons mocking Allah were published in newspapers and a cartoonist was assassinated, these cartoons were pulled from media worldwide. Of course, what did Bucqueroux? She published them on her website with her students. So there is the test. Are you with me, or are you not with me? So that's a big one for young students to learn. And also represent the underdog and women and children and animals. She had balls of steel, balls that clanged, more balls than the NFL. And thank you, Tina, for taking care of me and your time of grief. You're on my rock. In her last days, I came back from the road knowing how sick she was, and Tina knew too. She was hurting bad, yet every morning she greeted me with a beautiful "hi." Whatever she was feeling inside, instead she wanted to cheer me up and cheer you up. So her last day on earth, she taught 2 classes, one via Skype from her bed and one in person. I drove her to MSU. She walked slowly down that hallway to her classroom. And I helped her set up her laptop in her class, and then went outside and waited in the hall and listened to her while she taught. Her students attentive and appreciative, not knowing that this was her first but last class. Bonnie Bucqueroux, she died with her boots on.
My name is Zoe Howard, and I'm Aunt Bonnie's niece. I'm a sophomore at LCC studying graphic design. I grew up as an only child and spent most of my childhood at Aunt Bonnie and Uncle Drew's. Some of my earliest memories are at their house, where Aunt Bonnie kept me entertained with art projects, piano playing, and giving me endless supply of sugar donuts and orange pop. We would have our own little New Year's Eve parties every year when I was young, and she would get me sparkling grape juice and confetti, and we would party just the 2 of us until we passed out on the couch. I always loved telling my friends that my aunt and uncle had cats named Butthole and Buttwipe, and that I get to do great things with her, like explore graveyards and paint her car, which not many 8-year-olds can say they have done. I was always amazed by her guts and not giving a shit if people thought she was outspoken or unconventional. I loved her determination and passion for just about everything that she put her mind to. It is those rare qualities about her that inspire me. She was always filming, which I didn't appreciate as a child because I was too embarrassed to get in front of a camera, but I'm so thankful that she did, so I can keep those memories forever. She was always supporting my creative side, whether it be setting up art classes for me, getting my first skateboard, or filming at-home piano recitals, giving me my first camera. Fast forward to this past year, Aunt Bonnie, Tina, and I would meet for our weekly art day, where we spent hours talking, eating Bonnie's homemade salads fresh from the hoop house, and exploring different ways to express our art. I learned so much from them. Not just about painting, but about life. And I think we grew closer because of that. For not having biological children of her own, she did a great job at raising me and making sure I loved every second of my life. As I grow through life stages, I will always think about the things Aunt Bonnie taught me. And I love you, Aunt Bonnie.
I invite you to continue to reflect as we take this time for musical interlude before we continue with our eulogists. Tears are good and laughter is very good, and it is a gift that we can do both at the same time. So continue to weep, continue to celebrate, and as we reflect on Bonnie's life, I'd invite you all to take this moment of silence and music to reflect and to prepare.
Rather sleep in a box like a bum on the street than in a fine feather bed without your little old cold feet. And I'd rather be deaf, dumb and stone blind than to know that your mornings will never be mine. And I'd rather die young than to And I'd rather go hungry than to eat lonesome stew. Oh, it's once in a lifetime, and it won't come again. It's here and it's gone on a magnolia wind. And I'd rather not walk through the garden again if I can't get your scent on a magnolia wind. And if it ever comes time that it comes time to go, sis, pack up your fiddle, sis, pack up your bow. 'Cause if I can't dance with you, then I won't dance at all. I'll just sit this one out with my back to the wall. 'Cause I'd rather not hear pretty music again if I can't get your fiddle on a magnolia wind. If I can't catch your scent on a magnolia wind.
Thank you, Jen. I'd invite Ray Garcia to begin with our friend and colleague eulogies as well. Ray? Gotcha. You got it.
Hello, my name is Ray, and I'm here to talk about Bonnie, my experiences with Bonnie, which were extensive and fun. And that's the thing about Bonnie, was that she was always fun, no matter what it was that we took on, whether it was political or hilarious, whatever. We had fun. Now, I met Bonnie by appearing on her TV show, From Left Field, back in like 1993. You know, it's really funny the way that I met her. Is we were going to play on her show on the Carnival of Stars, Sir Hypolot's Carnival of Stars. And that day our drummer decided to go AWOL on an extensive crack bender. So we showed up with no drummer. And I had chosen, because we didn't have a drummer, I would play guitar, even though I was a bass player. And I played guitar like a bass player. But we went on anyway, and what the singer, with the singer, guitarist, and me, what the singer had planned to do was, when we came on stage, we were going to all pee our pants on live television, right? Now, the funny thing was, I had never intended on peeing my pants. I told him I'm not going to pee my pants on TV. But Flem was determined to go ahead with it. He was the singer of the Flem Chunks. And so Chaz, the guitar player, peed a big puddle. And he's splashing around in it, but Flem got pee shy. It was hilarious. He had this big idea, you know, to be on TV, and he couldn't pee. Now, for some reason, that Bonnie found that hilarious, and Next thing you know, I was co-host on of her TV show. Now, I think I came on right at the time Bonnie was intent on making a political turn, because the show was right after these right-wing wingnuts, John Mangopoulos, if any of you remember this guy, and his boneheaded crony. So we basically had spent the time taking phone calls from people that would abuse us, and we would riff. That's when I discovered Bonnie was brilliant. I mean, she could really incisively nail anybody, including me. And after that, that's probably like 1993, and the show went on, but it was destined to fail because Bonnie did not like to follow rules. And what we ended up having, there were this new director of the the cable TV local channel issued forth all these new rules that the programming was supposed to follow, and Bonnie wrote all over them, "Rules suck." And needless to say, we weren't on TV that much longer. That was Bonnie's inherent anarcho-syndicalism. I think she really would have made a good activist in 1930 Spain, because she was at the core an anarcho-syndicalist, and that was what I learned and practiced. And I discovered that we shared the very same outlook on life, and from there, things just get crazy. You may know that she actually ran for Congress back in 2000. Again, like I said, fun was the motivating force for everything in her life. And she was determined to run a effective campaign, but the local media wouldn't pay attention to her because she was a third-party candidate. She was the Green candidate for East Lansing area representative to Congress. And she cooked up this scheme by which she was going to get the attention of I think it was Tim Skubic was hosting the debate, right? And she outfitted a few of us with green feather boas, and we were the dancing Jessies. As if you recall, at the time, Jesse Ventura was popular, and we were supposed to be the dancing Jessies. We're going to follow Tim around to remind him of Bonnie's candidacy. Needless to say, we didn't get any attention other than a few choice pieces of fruit that were hurled at us. But that was the point when she realized that conventional media was a waste of time, and she put her effort into online. I guess it was like one of the first online candidacies, and she really was effective. And she also she got a lot of votes on the MSU campus. We had quite a few campus episodes of the Dancing Jessies appearing at her political talks, and she was quite the political speaker. And the thing of it was that she wasn't taken seriously because she was not one of the main parties, right? There's a two-party lock on politics. And so she put her efforts into online candidacy, and she was way ahead of her time across the board, not just with the online thing, but with her plan was to pass a living wage, not a minimum wage. She was advocating $10 for a living wage back in year 2000, which now they're actually starting to talk about political discussions of raising the minimum wage to a living wage standard approaching $15. The governor of New York is behind that. And that, I like to think that Bonnie and I were the instigators of start to change the discourse. Minimum wage is a waste of time. Go for a living wage. And from there, she got into the technology. She was always an early adopter with everything, and the social media. She devoted herself to fostering young voices and unheard people on the net, and she really effectively did that through Spartan Edge and LansingOnline.com and such like websites. Bonnie never tired. I mean, it was amazing. Now, there's a million stories that I could tell that, I don't want to stand here and drone on, but what I would conclude would be that Bonnie is someone who I cherish very much, and I feel like I'm lost without her. But I always had a philosophy that what would Bonnie do would be the question I would ask, no matter what, to remember what Bonnie would do. And inevitably, it was the most radical of all options. And I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to believe what would Bonnie do would be the most progressive thing I could think to do in her honor. So thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Bonnie loved life. She lived life so much more than others, although I'm not sure Bonnie could ever achieve what's called happiness. In an article she wrote about turning 70 years old, she stated that she would remain relentless until her last breath, not because experience suggested she would succeed at saving the world, but evidence suggested she would indeed fail. Bonnie taught approximately 20 years at the MSU School of Journalism, teaching 1 to 4 classes every semester, including summers. We actually taught the first online journalism class together around 2006 when I was a PhD student at MSU. And even during her last days of her life, she devoted her minute bumps of energy to creating video lectures and assignments from her home. And a few days before she died, she uploaded a 28-minute YouTube video lecture on the Internet of Things, big data, and the semantic web. She lost herself in both technology and storytelling. In one of her favorite classroom exercises, she pushed her students to visualize how they would tell an interactive story about Paul Revere's ride and today's mediascape. For example, she said there could be a podcast with a noted political professor explaining why this ride matters, an interactive timeline of events leading up to the ride. And of course, we have to do a video profile of Revere himself, showing him at work and at home, and as well as preparing for the ride. But we also know there would have to be a feature story on that horse, too. We became instant friends because we shared in the language of teaching, storytelling, and creativity. We would spend hours exploring each other's mind, probing deeper, seeking these aha moments from each other. Her nourishment and major motivation for truly living was derived from her close friends and her students. She often shared with me how individual students just moved her. Bonnie bonded with the crusaders of social justice, the lost artistic geniuses, the ones seared with scars of life, often from unstable homes. And that is why the School of Journalism has set up a scholar fund in her name to help such students. She inspired students to adopt technological tools. For example, journalism graduate Amanda Chodnicki said, "Bonnie taught my first journalism class, and my love for the world of journalism only grew. MSU simply will not be the same without her. Thank you for forcing me to make a Twitter, and thank you for helping mold me into the journalist that I am today. You and your creative spirit will be missed." To her students, Bonnie was also simply a compassionate human being. Miguel Martinez Valle said, "Bonnie was one of the most unique people I had the pleasure of knowing. I mean, who else would come up with that name? Thank you for always fighting for the underdog. Thank you for pushing me to learn and report about things I first didn't know about. Thank you for being a bright and colorful light in the world." See, you and I know she didn't know how to shut off that brain of hers, unless it involved her recent love of art or her rescued pets, her cat's butt wipe, butthole, her chihuahua, Lemmy. Many of you viewed her artistic paintings and drawings on her social media accounts. The happiest I ever saw Bonnie, she wasn't really this joyful type, but the happiest I ever saw her was at her 70th birthday party, when she pulled up her silver, rusting, just-purchased van onto the lawn. Drew was cringing in the corner. She said to me, "Go on," pointing over to her van. Surprisingly, I'd never looked at her as though she was crazy until that moment. But she handed me a spray paint can of the color teal and said, "Draw whatever you want on my van." I shot her a look of serious hesitation, and she turned away from me and began painting a pink squiggly colored horizontal line across her van. And then I soon joined the madness. The world is less interesting, definitely, less amusing, less moral, less creative, less passionate without her. The world is just simply less, as my friend Brad said. Her loss leaves a void in many of our lives and weakens a thread that connects many of us, including me to you in our community. But we are all better for being challenged by Bonnie and her sharing spirit. And I'd ask you, does the world have to be less? Imagine the life of Bonnie. She chose to be a teacher, an activist, a writer, and a storyteller. She chose that life. She's a genius, but she chose that. And she created a life that inspires others to repeat it. She volunteered and collected countless hours of video, audio, and images to give people a platform to be heard. The greatest gesture to show that you cared is to share your talents and do something for someone in your community. Most of us can visualize the impact she has had on us. I can. We emailed each other almost every day. Well, she usually emailed me every day. And we often talked on the phone 1 to 1.5 hours about 3 times a week since I moved here several years ago. She has been my only constant. Bonnie told me that I was her best friend when I visited her in the hospital several weeks before she passed. I felt a loss for words at that moment, and as I always do, I addressed the awkwardness by elevating the awkwardness of the situation. As she lay there with her painful, swollen leg propped up on a pillow in her hospital bed, and her body tinseled with laptop and phone power cords and IV tubes, I smiled when she said that thoughtful comment, and I told her to scoot over and make room for me on the bed. She belted out a laugh, and we continued chatting. See, I believed that showing up demonstrated to Bonnie how much I cared. I am thankful that I was with her during her last days. When I heard the news of her death, I collapsed to the floor of my wooden floor, and shortly thought to myself later that I never told her I loved her. See, if you know us academics, we're terrible expressions from the heart. Our bodies are often simply vessels that transport our brains, or perhaps our egos, around. I summoned up the courage to speak today because I should have said more and not just did. Our friendship was marked by hours of conversation and laughter. And I know many people are not as fortunate to have such a friendship in their lives right now. I will close by saying, Bonnie, I love you, and thank you for caring.
Thank you, Serena. I'd invite Dr. Carl Taylor to come forward, please.
Thank you. As I sit there, and to limit it to the time period, I have so many Bonnie experiences and stories. Bonnie not was, Bonnie is to me. And Bonnie is connected to me forever. That's for me, and I can't say that to anyone else. I have to tell you that the morning that Drew called, that for some know that in another life, I served as a bodyguard, professional bodyguard for years, for the likes of Yul Brynner and Michael Jackson and many others. And when Drew called me that morning, I was struck by, I thought I would never feel or see what I felt that morning with Drew. I was with the late icon Count Basie in his last tour, and he was in a wheelchair. And it was my job was to make sure that nobody got near him. He was very fragile. He's a very loving man. And Quincy Jones was like a son to him. And Quincy burst out and walked into a dressing room and cried. I had never seen anyone cry like that in my life. And the great Lena Horne was standing there, and she looked at me, and she said, when I leave, when I pass on, I can only hope that someone will cry and love me the way Q is with Count. That was the same thought, the feeling that I had on that Wednesday morning when Drew called me. I've been knowing Bonnie forever. I could feel the loss, the pain that Drew had at that moment. The same holds true, Tina, for you. Bonnie and I fought. She had bigger than balls. Because if you fight with me, really fight, then you have a fight. She didn't back up 1 inch. She fought for all the underdogs. And when we didn't agree, we didn't agree. It was a battle of titans. And she pissed me off. She pissed me off. I would not stand here and make a joke about it. I mean it. Me and her be pissed at each other sometimes. Fine, Bonnie, that's fine, Carl. But she also was my coach. She was the one that told me when others would say it behind my back, she said, you know, Carl, this is what they're saying about you. She was the one that did not soft pedal the academy and me. I do not fit the description for many of an academic. She was the one that gave me those talks on the darkest days. She also was very puzzling to me because in this big heart that she had, she would take things off of people that she would fight for others. There were times of betrayals that I would say the magic word. I will be your Lou Gabrowski. I will take care of this for you. No. She would not have it for herself. She would fight for others, but she always took the higher road, always. Bonnie was, and I do not use this word loosely, she was simply a genius. I would say she's the only person that I knew that if she didn't know it, or if we disagreed, to make her point, give her a couple of days, maybe a couple hours, that she'd come back and stick it to me. But she also was very honest. If she was wrong, she was always bigger, always selfless in saying, you know what, you were right on that when I was wrong. I appreciated that very much. And last, I would say that Bonnie feared nothing, absolutely nothing. Her and Drew came to Detroit. I would take her on the tour of the darkest parts of Detroit. I was always the one that had to say, Bonnie, we can't go there. She feared nothing. She took some of my toughest people, and when I recently told them that she had passed, they all stopped and said to give her both their love and their respect. And that says a lot, because these are the people that no one talks about. She will forever be part of me. As I said, there's only a transcending for me with Bonnie. Genius, humanitarian, and more than anything, she loved her family, and Drew, your heart.
Thank you, Carl. I invite Karen to come forward and to offer her remarks and thoughts. Thank you.
Well, Bonnie would be amused that we are here in a church, given that she was an atheist, pardon me, on Halloween. I think her criticism of this would be that we didn't require people to come in costume. Bonnie was a deeply irreverent person with a great sense of humor. She loved to have fun. Bonnie and I met over 35 years ago and immediately bonded and shared over some common loves and passions. Love for living creatures, gardening, political satire and comedy, and social welfare issues. She was really a force of nature for those things that she was deeply passionate about. She gave many small and large creatures alike home and shelter, particularly dogs and people. I know I inherited a few of them and spent many hours rounding them up at the cemetery by their home in Mason. We shared many, many conversations about a variety of social ills of the day. And of course, back then, they're the same social ills we have today: living wage, community policing, death penalty. Bonnie would always try to convince me of how ill-informed or wrong-headed I was about some issues, and she would spend a lot of time talking about her side of an issue. Sometimes she would even follow me on a run around the square out in Mason by her house, trying to convince me. And you know, Bonnie did run. She was a runner at one time. It was short-lived. She didn't like it. But she would take every opportunity to have a conversation about what she was very passionate about. We didn't always see eye to eye on issues, and when we didn't, she would pull out her best presidential debate skills and try and convince me. And then there would be the periodic phone calls to follow up, to see how my education on the topic was coming. And this would go on for many months. We also had a lot of fun and laughed a lot. She was a very funny person with a great sense of humor. She saw the humor in just about everything, which I think was Bonnie's way of really expressing pain on an issue that she felt deeply about. We officiated at each other's weddings, two of the most fun parties I've ever attended, but also very poignant for Drew and Bonnie's wedding with the passing of her father just days before. Bonnie lived her values and she lived her passion. We shared many, many joys and many sorrows. On the few opportunities she took to come to Colorado to visit, she always reminded me to put on my lotion, my sun protection, because, well, after all, I was living a mile high. And you know about the sun and high altitude radiation. She would also always remind me to follow what was going on the Rocky Flats nuclear dump site just down the road so that it didn't impact my health long term. She expressed her deep caring and compassion in some of the funniest ways. I carry a very, very deep appreciation of her humor, her generosity of spirit, her wicked sharp intellect, her deep compassion for living things. She was an exceedingly kind, generous, and compassionate friend, and she will be deeply missed.
Invite Sam to come forward to close our remarks today.
Hi, all. I met Bonnie, and I didn't really even know who she was when I first met her. When I was 13 years old, some friends of mine and I went and snuck into a heavy metal show at a VFW hall. And we thought, you know, this is cool. We're here, we're hanging out. We got our, Metallica shirts on and whatever. And this woman comes up with really kind of bushy blonde hair, and she says, how old are you kids? Who are you? Do your mothers know you're here? And that kind of thing. So we kind of smoothed it out with Bonnie, and she let us. I didn't know who she was at the time, but she let us hang out and watch this show. And of course, Drew's band was playing, and that was just kind of a distant memory. And then, probably around 1999, I decided to volunteer for the Green Party campaign, and so I showed up in Old Town, and there was a guy there. I don't remember his name, but I do remember the name Bonnie Bucqueroux, and he basically said, "You're going to be campaigning for this woman, Bonnie Bucqueroux," and he explained the whole, her whole campaign platform to me, and I don't quite remember it now, but I'm sure some of you might. So I went door to door and explained Bonnie Bucqueroux's campaign platform to people for I don't know how many dozens and dozens of people I talked to, and then. And it's weird. So there's like serendipitous intersections of interest that I had with Bonnie. And then finally, when I met my wife, and through, by extension, through the Bernie family, I got a chance to actually meet Bonnie Bucqueroux. And I remembered both of these incidents of meeting her before then. And Diane Bernie said, you should really talk with Bonnie. She shares a lot of interests with you. You should sit down and talk with her. So I sat down and talked with Bonnie. And at the time, I was working on a project with Stanford University that they called the Student Journalism, Digital Journalism Project. And they had a lot of backing, hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. And I described what I was doing, and then Bonnie counter-described what she was doing with MSU, and she didn't have any of this backing or any of this support, and she actually made a lot more progress and a lot more, impact, in my opinion, and I was just blown away by that. So I started to realize that there was a lesson, in that work, and I began to meet with Bonnie and talk with her about the work that I was doing and the work that she was doing, and I realized that Bonnie is actually a futurist, Bonnie, I realized that through all those discussions that Bonnie is probably one of the most important thinkers and just generally important people that I ever have come across in my life, of all the people that I've ever met, quite honestly. And the reason why is that not only is she on par with the greatest futurists and intellects out there, but she also put it in practice. And that was one of the first lessons that I learned from Bonnie, was not only is it useful to learn about, intellectual concepts and deep learning and to sit around and think about it and get excited about it, but to try to do something. And Bonnie wasn't even interested that, the projects that I was working on had all this backing. She didn't want that. And so I kept thinking, why, And so I was never a student of Bonnie's in MSU or any education context, but I learned all these lessons from Bonnie. And so what I'm getting at with that story is that, she rejected the trappings of academia while being inside of academia. And that was, to me, that was a really, it was a really valuable lesson in terms of seeing that, she thought that people controlled these institutions through fear. And basically, she was trying to help me understand that one of the first things to do is step away from that and build up and take theory and put it into practice in order to build up a way to rise above the fear. So that was one of the first lessons that I learned. And also, when I would get into these discussions with Bonnie Bucqueroux, any time that an assumption would leave my mouth, she would immediately question it. And it really drove me crazy, and I could see that it drove other people crazy, just from listening to what people said here. But I thought about it more and more, and I realized that not only was she trying to get all of us to question whatever's going on out there, but she was also saying that we have a responsibility, if we're going to question the world, that we need to question ourselves, that you need to look and ask, the same critical questions of yourself. And that's the second lesson that I took away from Bonnie, was basically to question myself at the same time that I'm questioning everything else. And the third lesson that I took away from Bonnie, and I didn't really know her as deeply as the rest of you did, but I still feel like I took away these valuable lessons in the little bit of time that she carved out to spend with me. And the third lesson that I learned was that, Bonnie really didn't see the world as like a pyramid where there's some pinnacle that you're going to reach the top of and achieve the ultimate goal of your life. And instead, really, she lived her life like a never-ending quest, all the way right up until the end. And she always tried to impart to all the rest of us that that life is a never-ending quest, and that you should seek not to be self-satisfied and not to just rest and say, okay, I've achieved that, now I'm just going to sit back and do nothing. The three lessons that I learned from her, to me seem to be the key to the things that are happening to us now and in the next 20 or 30 years. By the time my son is my age, I feel like these things will be the lessons that Bonnie Bucqueroux taught me are the skills that people will need to overcome the challenges of the future. So we love you, Bonnie Bucqueroux, and thank you for all these lessons.
Thank you to all the speakers and all of those who have had the opportunity to share memories. And I would say it again, please do take the time to join downstairs over food and over drinks and over time to really laugh and to continue to cry with one another. I appreciate getting to know Tina and Drew through this, and I admit, lest you think that I am too dense as a clergy person, the irony of necessarily doing this here. But forgive me for taking the last word. The church used to be a place that spoke up for those who had no voice, and we passed off that responsibility. The church used to be a place where questions were encouraged much more than faith, where doubt was the expected norm so that we would challenge one another to continue to grow, and we got lazy. The church used to speak up for those people who needed to have voices in the halls of justice and power. And largely, I'm embarrassed by my own faith tradition as we have sat on our laurels and we have given lip service to these things that used to define us. I give no apologies for my Christian background. I'd say the following of the Christ that I believe in was a radical who spoke out for those, against those who had power, against those who were striving to hold back our truest potential. And what I regret most about Bonnie Bucqueroux's passing is the opportunity that I don't have her right now to ask those tough questions to the church, that I can laugh with her over a meal, and that I could be challenged with her as well. But let her death not be the end of those types of conversations. Regardless of your faith tradition, the ability to believe, to doubt, and to question, that continues. And I would say let her legacy in this place in particular be one of community. And let us look around and have the opportunity to ask people in our community, out of love and out of compassion and even out of spite, to push one another in such a way that we're inspired to do something better. The worst thing I see in Christian or non-Christian memorial services and funerals is a finality that ends with the last note of the last song. Let that not be the case today. Be inspired by Bonnie's ferocity, for her love of learning, for her joy of sharing with other people, for the way that she made you question, that made you ask what was next. Continue to grow with one another, and more importantly, tell stories to your children and your grandchildren about her life. As we leave this place, let this not be the ending, but let it be a continuation of a journey of joy. And to each and every one of you, whether you're a member of this congregation or not, whether it's the first time you've heard me or one another, hear that very firm call to speak out for hope, to call people to task when they are doing things that keep us from experiencing our true humanity. Be joyful, be cynical, be irreverent, and be reverent at the same time. Do all of these things together and realize that true faith is acting out. I close with a very almost cliche passage from Ecclesiastes, yet it is so very appropriate. You see, we talk so much in the church about acting and about changes in our lives, but often we don't make those changes happen. We wait for them, and then we miss them. Frederick Douglass talked about the first 20 years of his life in slavery, how he prayed and prayed and prayed that he would be released from bondage, and realized that the only time his prayers were answered was when he stopped praying with his mouth and started praying with his hands and his feet. We need to pray like Bonnie prayed, through activism, through community, and through calling people to task, and see the changes in our lives, the seasons and transitions that we can make happen now. There's a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear down and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And what do workers gain from all their toil? I've seen all the burdens that God has laid on the human race. Everything has been made, and everything is beautiful in its time. The divine has set eternity in the human heart, and yet no one can fathom what has been done from the beginning to the end. I know that there's nothing better for people to do than to be happy, to do good while they live, so that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil, for that is a gift of God. Make those times happen. Don't wait for them. This is a time for us to weep, yet this is also a time for us to rejoice. And so as we close here today, may a blessing be upon each and every one of you for gathering in this community. Drew and Tina invite you to continue to share memories with one another. And they thank you on behalf of all of Bonnie Bucqueroux's family, friends, students, and colleagues for the joy you have in this room for surrounding her in her life and now remembering her in her death. As the musicians come forward to offer Amazing Grace, I would encourage you, if you do feel like singing along and are curious about some of the words in the later verses, in the red hymnal number 649, you can pick it out if you'd like. Join in silence, join in song, join in laughing, and join in hope. Let us all know that we are part of one community, and we have one love and one blessing for us all. God bless you, and thank you for being here today.
Hello? Hello? I just want to say one thing about Bonnie. She was prickly and difficult. And proudly so.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that led my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious would that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. Was grace that kept me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.